Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the research vessel Horizon's Edge, watching the stars through the main display. His crew had been mapping this part of space for 3 months now. It was quiet work, but Jake liked it that way. The universe was big enough without looking for trouble. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Communications Officer Beth Williams. She turned from her control panel with worry in her eyes. "It's not like anything we've seen before." Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of strange?" "A transmission, but it's coming from everywhere at once, like someone is broadcasting to this entire sector of space." Beth pressed a few buttons. "The signal is strong, really strong. Whoever sent this has power we can't even imagine. Can you decode it?" "I'm trying, but the language is completely unknown. We need Dr. Grant." Jake pressed the comm button. "Dr. Lisa Grant to the bridge. Priority 1. Dr. Grant arrived within minutes. She was the best linguist on the ship, maybe one of the best in human space. If anyone could figure out this message, it would be her. "Show me what you have," she said, sitting down at Beth's station. The next 4 hours passed slowly. Jake watched Dr. Grant work, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. She ran the signal through every translation program they had. She compared it to every known language in Earth's databases. Finally, she looked up. Her face was pale. "I've got most of it," she said, "but you're not going to like what it says." Jake sat down. "Tell me." "The message is from something called the Galactic Defense Coalition. They say Earth has been chosen to join their war effort. We have no choice in the matter." "War effort?" Dr. Grant nodded. "There's an enemy out there. They call them the Devourers. According to this message, they destroy entire star systems, eat whole planets. The Coalition has been fighting them for a long time." Beth looked confused. "But we've never heard of any Galactic Coalition. We thought we were alone out here." "That's because they never bothered to contact us before," Dr. Grant said. "The message makes it clear. We're what they call a primitive species. They only contact primitive species when they need soldiers." Jake felt cold. "Soldiers?" "The message says Earth must provide ships and crews for the war. We're being assigned to something called the 47th Combat Wing. A fleet will arrive at Earth in 2 weeks to collect our forces." The bridge went quiet. Jake stared at the display showing peaceful stars. In 2 weeks, everything would change. "There's more," Dr. Grant said quietly. "I found some technical data in the transmission. The Coalition has been fighting this war for over 1,000 years. The 47th Combat Wing is where they send species that can't fight effectively. It's a suicide mission." 2 weeks later, Jake found himself in command of a much larger fleet. Admiral Karen Blake had arrived from Earth with every ship they could spare. Military vessels, converted cargo ships, even some passenger liners with weapons bolted onto their hulls. It wasn't much, but it was everything humanity could give. Admiral Blake called a meeting of all ship captains. Jake looked around the room at the faces of men and women who had volunteered for what everyone knew was probably a death mission. "I won't lie to you," Admiral Blake said. "Earth's military analysts have gone through all the data we could find about this coalition. The news isn't good." She activated a holographic display showing ship designs and battle records. "The coalition has lost over 300 species to these devourers. Each time they follow the same pattern. They assign the new species to a combat wing, give them basic weapons, and send them into battle with no training or support." Captain Julie Davis raised her hand. "What about the species that survived? The ones that are still fighting all have one thing in common. They're physically powerful, strong, fast, or heavily armored. The Coalition seems to believe that raw strength is the only thing that matters in this war." Lieutenant Commander Tony Rivera, the chief engineer, looked at the weapon specifications on his tablet. "Admiral, these energy weapons they've given us are incredibly basic. The design hasn't changed in hundreds of years. It's like they stopped trying to improve them." Admiral Blake nodded. "That matches what we've learned about Coalition military doctrine. They have ancient traditions about honor in combat. They believe their ancestors' methods are perfect and shouldn't be changed. Jake studied the battle records. Every engagement followed the same pattern. The coalition fleets would form up in massive formations and attack directly. Sometimes they won through overwhelming numbers. Usually they lost. "Admiral," he said, "have any of these species ever tried different tactics?" "No. According to the records, they all fight the same way. The strong species use heavy weapons and frontal attacks. The fast species use speed and agility. But they never adapt or change their methods." Commander Alex Thompson looked grim. "And the Devourers have had 1,000 years to learn how to counter these tactics." "Exactly," Admiral Blake said. "Which brings us to our situation. Humanity isn't the strongest or fastest species. We don't have natural armor or energy manipulation abilities. According to coalition standards, we shouldn't be able to contribute anything meaningful to this war." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Dr. Grant spoke up. "I've been monitoring coalition communications. Most of the alien commanders consider us cannon fodder. They expect us to follow orders, fight bravely, and die quickly so the real warriors can handle the important battles." Jake felt anger building inside him. "They're not even going to train us?" "No," Admiral Blake said. "Coalition policy is clear. Primitive species learn by doing or they don't learn at all. They'll give us coordinates and targets. Everything else is up to us." Navigator Paul Jackson had been quiet during the meeting. Now he looked up from his tablet. "Admiral, I've been studying the movement patterns in these battle records. Every coalition species uses the same basic formations. It's like they all went to the same military academy centuries ago and never graduated." "What do you mean?" "Admiral, so..." Blake asked. "Look at this," Paul said, projecting his analysis onto the main display. Three-dimensional formations, predictable spacing, textbook flanking maneuvers. It's all very neat and organized, but it's also completely predictable. Tony. Rivera nodded. "Same with their weapons systems. Everything is standardized across all species. They might have different power levels, but they all work exactly the same way." Jake looked around the room. "So we're going into a war where the enemy knows every possible move our allies might make, where no one is allowed to change tactics or improve technology, and where we're expected to die heroically without making any real difference." "That about sums it up," Admiral Blake said. Beth Williams had been reviewing communication logs. "Admiral, I found something interesting. The Coalition has detailed records on every species' combat abilities and methods, but they have no data on humanity at all." "Of course not," Admiral Blake said. "We've never fought in their war before." "No, that's not what I mean," Beth said. "They have no data on how humans think about warfare. They don't know our history or our methods. To them, we're completely unknown." Jake felt something shift in his mind. An idea was forming. Dr. Grant looked excited. "Beth is right. Every species in the Coalition follows the same basic patterns because they've been part of this galactic civilization for thousands of years. They all learned warfare from the same sources. But humans developed our military thinking completely, independently." Admiral Blake studied the faces around the table. She could see the same thought forming in everyone's mind. "You're suggesting we don't try to fit into their system," she said slowly. Jake nodded. "I'm suggesting we use the fact that we're outsiders. They expect us to fail, so they won't pay much attention to how we fail. That gives us room to try things they would never consider." The meeting ended with more questions than answers. But for the first time since receiving that alien transmission, Jake felt something besides fear. He felt hope. 3 days later, the human fleet reached the Coalition staging area. Jake stood on his bridge and watched alien ships that looked like nothing he had ever imagined. Massive vessels with crystalline hulls, sleek fighters that seemed to be made of living metal, warships covered in spikes and armor plating. All of them following the same flight patterns, all of them using the same formation protocols, all of them completely predictable. Captain, Beth said, we're receiving docking instructions. We're being assigned to berth 47C. Jake smiled grimly. Even their parking spaces were organized according to ancient tradition. Take us in, Paul, he said. Let's go learn how not to fight this war. The Coalition staging area was bigger than anything Jake Morrison had ever seen. Thousands of ships from dozens of different species filled the space around a massive artificial station. Each species had their own section, their own docking bays, their own support systems. The human fleet looked tiny by comparison. Captain, Communications Officer Beth Williams said, we're being hailed by Coalition Command. Put them through. The main screen flickered and showed an alien face that looked like it was carved from stone. The creature had 4 eyes and spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. Human vessels, you are assigned to Combat Wing. 47 under the command of War Leader Thane of the Cronus Empire. You will observe standard Coalition protocols at all times. Your first mission briefing will occur in 6 hours. The transmission ended without giving Jake a chance to respond. Friendly bunch, Navigator Paul Jackson said. Lieutenant Commander Tony Rivera looked up from his engineering station. Captain, I'm reading the energy signatures from the other ships in our combat wing. We're grouped with 3 other species. All of them are reading as technologically primitive by Coalition standards. Admiral Blake's voice came through the comm system. All captains, report to the Valor's Pride for immediate briefing. Jake left Commander Alex Thompson in charge and took a shuttle to Admiral Blake's ship. The briefing room was crowded with human officers and a few aliens he hadn't seen before. War Leader Thane stood at the front of the room. He was nearly 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor plating that looked like it could stop a missile. His voice rumbled when he spoke. Combat. Wing 47 has one purpose, he said. You will engage Devourer patrol units and keep them busy while real combat forces prepare for major operations. This is not a complicated mission. You attack, you fight, you die with honor. Captain Julie Davis raised her hand. War Leader, what kind of support will we receive? Support? Thane looked confused. You have weapons. You have ships. What more support could a warrior need? Jake exchanged glances with Admiral Blake. What about tactical information? Enemy capabilities? Battle plans. Battle plans are simple, Thane said. You fly toward the enemy. You shoot at the enemy. You keep shooting until they are dead or you are dead. This is how all species fight. This is how warriors have always fought. Dr. Lisa Grant had been studying her translation tablet. War Leader, could you tell us about Devourer tactics? How do they typically engage enemy forces? Thane's 4 eyes focused on her. The Devourers are cunning but predictable. They use speed and deception to avoid direct combat. They strike weak points and retreat before honorable forces can respond, but they cannot stand against determined assault. After the briefing, the human officers gathered in Admiral Blake's private conference room. Did anyone else notice that he basically described every defeat in the Coalition records as a victory? Commander Thompson said. Admiral Blake nodded. The Coalition has been losing this war for centuries, but they keep using the same tactics because they believe anything else would be dishonorable. Jake had been thinking about something. Admiral, I want to split our forces for the next few days. We need to observe how the different Coalition species actually fight. What do you have in mind? I want Thompson to shadow some Cronus operations. Julie can observe the Vorthan swarm units. I'll watch how the other Combat Wing 47 species handle themselves. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we commit to any strategy. Admiral Blake agreed. Over the next 3 days, the human officers spread out across the Coalition fleet to observe and learn. Commander Thompson returned with detailed reports about Cronus battle methods. Captain, they're incredibly powerful, he told Jake. Their ships are massive, heavily armored, and armed with weapons that could destroy a small moon, but they're also completely inflexible. Thompson showed Jake video recordings from his observation mission. Watch this engagement with a small devourer, Scout Force. The recording showed 12 Cronus battleships arranged in a perfect formation. They moved forward slowly and steadily, firing constantly at 3 much smaller devourer vessels. The Cronus ships are winning through pure firepower, Thompson continued. But look at how they move. Jake watched the tactical display. The Cronus formation never changed. They maintained perfect spacing and fired in coordinated volleys. It was impressive and completely predictable. The Devourers are just staying out of range and picking off the slower Cronus ships one by one, Jake realized. Exactly. The Cronus never adapt. They never change formation or try different tactics. They just keep doing what they've always done, until they win through superior numbers or lose everything. Captain Julie Davis had similar observations about the Vorthon swarm. They're fast, Captain. Faster than anything I've ever seen. Their ships can change direction instantly and accelerate to incredible speeds. She showed her own recordings. But watch their attack patterns. Jake saw Vorthon fighters performing elaborate aerial displays around Devourer positions. They moved in complex spirals and loops, their formations looking almost like artwork. It's beautiful, Jake said. It's also completely useless, Julie replied. Those formations are ceremonial. They're based on ancient Vorthon mating dances, or something. The pilots spend more time looking graceful than actually hitting targets. Jake watched as the Vorthon fighters were systematically destroyed by Devourer defensive systems that had obviously learned to predict their elaborate maneuvers. Let me guess, Jake said. They refused to change their tactics because it would violate their cultural traditions. Right. Honor and tradition are more important than actually winning. Jake's own observations of the other Combat Wing 47 species were equally frustrating. Every species followed rigid patterns that hadn't changed. In centuries, some relied on superior numbers, others used specialized weapons or unique biological abilities, but none of them adapted or improvised. Meanwhile, Dr. Grant had been analyzing captured Devourer technology with Tony Rivera's help. Captain, she reported, we've made an important discovery. The Devourer ships use adaptive artificial intelligence systems for combat decisions. Tony nodded enthusiastically. The AI studies enemy tactics and develops counters automatically. But here's the interesting part. The system is designed to analyze known galactic warfare patterns. What does that mean? Jake asked. It means the Devourer AI has extensive databases on how every coalition species fights, Dr. Grant explained. It can predict Cronus formations, anticipate Vorthon maneuvers, and counter every known tactical approach. Jake felt excitement building. But it doesn't have data on human tactics. Right. Because humans aren't in their database. We've never fought in this war before, and our military development was completely independent of galactic civilization. Tony was practically bouncing with enthusiasm. Captain, I've been studying the basic energy weapons they gave us. The technology is ancient by our standards, but it's also incredibly standardized. Every coalition species uses exactly the same systems. And that's bad because standardization means predictability. The Devourer AI knows exactly how these weapons work, what their limitations are, and how to counter them. But there's something else. Tony activated his tablet and showed technical specifications. These systems were designed to be tamper-proof. The Coalition considers modifying military equipment to be a serious crime, but they're only tamper-proof against known modification techniques. Jake was beginning to understand. You think you can reprogram them? I think I can do a lot more than that. I think I can turn these basic energy systems into something the Devourer AI has never seen before. Dr. Grant had more information. I've been monitoring Coalition communications. There's going to be a major engagement tomorrow. Combat Wing 47 is being sent to support a defensive action around the Kepler mining colony. Admiral Blake's voice came through the comm system. All captains, emergency briefing in 1 hour. We have our first mission. The briefing was held aboard war leader Thane's flagship. The massive alien stood before a holographic display showing the tactical situation. "The Devourers are attacking the Kepler mining colony with a force of 50 vessels," he announced. "Coalition forces will establish a defensive perimeter and engage the enemy in honorable combat." Jake studied the tactical display. The coalition plan was straightforward to the point of stupidity. They would form up in 3 battle lines and wait for the Devourers to attack. Then they would engage in a direct firefight until one side or the other was completely destroyed. "Combat Wing 47 will take position on the left flank," Thane continued. "You will hold your assigned positions and follow standard engagement protocols at all times." Captain Davis raised her hand. "War Leader, what if the Devourers try to outflank us? Then you will hold your position and die with honor while the main force adjusts to counter the flanking maneuver." After the briefing, Admiral Blake gathered her officers. "Any thoughts on this brilliant strategy?" Jake looked around the room at the faces of his fellow humans. "I think it's time we stopped pretending to be part of their system." "What do you mean?" Admiral Blake asked. "I mean, tomorrow we're going to find out if human tactics work against an enemy that's never seen them before." Tony Rivera was grinning. "Captain, give me 6 hours and I can reprogram." 3 weeks after their first victory, Jake Morrison stood before the largest Devourer fleet anyone had ever seen. Intelligence reports said it contained over 300 ships, including massive command vessels that dwarfed anything in the Coalition fleet. The enemy was heading directly for the Meridian Defense Platform, the most important Coalition base in this sector. If it fell, the Devourers would have a clear path to a dozen inhabited systems. "Captain," Beth Williams said from her communications station, "we're receiving final battle orders from Coalition Command." Jake read the orders and felt his heart sink. The Coalition was planning the largest defensive operation in their history, using every traditional tactic they had ever developed. 3 separate battle lines, coordinated flanking maneuvers, and overwhelming firepower concentrated at specific points. It was exactly the kind of large-scale engagement the Devourer AI was designed to counter. "Admiral Blake," Jake said on the secure channel, "please tell me you've seen these orders." "I've seen them, Captain. Coalition Command is so confident after our recent victories that they're throwing everything they have at this battle." Jake understood the problem immediately. The Coalition thought their traditional tactics were working because the humans had been secretly making them work. Now they were planning a massive operation based on completely wrong assumptions. "Admiral, if we follow these orders, the Coalition is going to lose everything." "I know. That's why we're not going to follow them." Admiral Blake called an emergency meeting of all human ship commanders. Jake took a shuttle to the flagship, his mind racing with possibilities. The meeting room was packed with every human officer in the fleet. Admiral Blake stood before a holographic display showing the approaching Devourer force. "People, we have a problem," she began. "The Coalition is about to commit to a battle they cannot win. Their traditional tactics work in small engagements when we're there to secretly support them. But this is different." Captain Julie Davis studied the tactical display. "Admiral, even if we use every trick we've developed, I don't see how 12 human ships can influence a battle this large." Commander Alex Thompson nodded grimly. "The Devourers will have too many ships for us to herd around like we did before, and their AI will be looking for the kind of anomalous behavior that gave us away in our last few engagements." Jake had been thinking about this problem for days. "Admiral, what if we don't try to influence the main battle at all?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we go after the real target? Look at this formation." Jake manipulated the holographic display to highlight specific ships in the Devourer fleet. 3 command vessels in the center, heavily protected. That's where their AI coordination systems are located. Lieutenant Commander Tony Rivera's eyes lit up. "Captain, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? I'm thinking that we've spent 3 weeks learning to confuse Devourer AI systems with our weapons and tactics. Maybe it's time to try something more direct." Dr. Lisa Grant looked skeptical. Jake, those command ships are protected by at least 50 escort vessels each. Even if our unconventional tactics work, we can't fight through that kind of defensive screen. Navigator Paul Jackson had been studying the fleet positions. Actually, we might not have to fight through them. Look at how they're arranged. He highlighted movement patterns on the display. The Devourer fleet is using a standard protective formation around their command ships, but it's designed to counter coalition attack patterns. They're expecting frontal assaults and flanking maneuvers. Jake began to understand. But they're not expecting infiltration. Right, Jackson continued. If we approach using movement patterns that look like space debris or damaged ships, we might be able to get close to the command vessels without triggering their defensive protocols. Tony Rivera was practically vibrating with excitement. And once we're close enough, I can try something I've been working on. Instead of just modifying our weapons to confuse their systems, what if we upload a virus directly into their command network? Admiral Blake looked around the room. You're talking about the most dangerous mission in human military history. 12 ships against the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled. Jake nodded. Yes, Admiral. But if we succeed, we could end this war. And if we fail? If we fail, the coalition loses anyway. At least this way, we go down fighting on our own terms. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. They were talking about abandoning the main coalition force and attempting what amounted to a suicide mission against impossible odds. Captain Gary Phillips broke the silence. Admiral, I volunteer to lead the infiltration team. So do I, Julie Davis added. One by one, every human commander in the room volunteered. Admiral Blake looked around at the faces of people who were willing to risk everything for a plan that probably wouldn't work. All right, she said finally, but we do this right. Tony, you have 6 hours to prepare whatever virus or hacking program you think can bring down their command systems. Paul, I want infiltration routes that look like natural debris fields or ship malfunctions. Jake felt a mixture of terror and excitement. Admiral, what about the coalition forces? We tell them we're following orders. Combat Wing 47 is being deployed to a flanking position to support the main attack. They won't know we've gone rogue until it's too late to stop us. The next few hours passed in frantic preparation. Tony Rivera worked with Dr. Grant to develop a computer virus based on human programming languages that no galactic AI had ever encountered. Navigator Jackson plotted approach routes that would make the human ships look like damaged coalition vessels drifting away from the battle. Captain Davis coordinated with the other ship commanders to plan their attack on the Devourer command vessels. They would have one chance to get close, upload Tony's virus, and escape before the enemy defensive systems could respond. Jake spent his time reviewing everything they had learned about Devourer tactics and technology. He was looking for any weakness they could exploit, any advantage they hadn't considered. Captain, Beth Williams said, I've been monitoring Devourer fleet communications. Their AI systems are definitely looking for the kind of tactical anomalies we've been using. Can you tell if they've figured out what we've been doing? Not completely. But they're suspicious. They've classified human ships as unpredictable and assigned additional monitoring resources to track our movements. That was both good and bad news. The Devourers knew humans were dangerous, but they still didn't understand why. Admiral Blake's voice came over the comm system. All ships, final briefing in 30 minutes. Jake looked around his bridge at the crew that had become his family over the past few months. They all knew this might be their last mission together. Whatever happens, he told them, I want you to know it's been an honor serving with all of you. Beth smiled. Save the speeches for after we save the galaxy, Captain. The final briefing was short and direct. Admiral Blake laid out the plan in simple terms. The human fleet would break away from coalition forces during the initial engagement. They would approach the Devourer command ships using stealth and deception. They would upload Tony's virus and retreat before enemy defenses could respond. If this works, Admiral Blake said. "The Devourer fleet will lose coordination and become vulnerable to Coalition attack. If it doesn't work, we'll be destroyed. But at least we'll take some of them with us." War Leader Thane's voice crackled. Over the Coalition command frequency. "All units, prepare for final advance. Today we destroy the Devourer menace forever." Jake almost felt sorry for the massive alien warrior. Thane genuinely believed that Coalition tactics would win this battle. He had no idea that his forces were walking into a trap designed by an enemy that had studied their methods for 1,000 years. "All ships," Admiral Blake broadcast on the human channel, "execute Operation Longshot." The human fleet moved into their assigned positions as the Coalition forces began their advance. To any observer, it looked like Combat Wing 47 was following orders perfectly. Then the Devourer fleet responded, and everything changed. The enemy ships moved with deadly precision, exploiting every weakness in the Coalition formation. They concentrated, fire on command vessels, disrupted communication networks, and systematically destroyed the Coalition's ability to coordinate their attack. Within minutes, it was clear that the Coalition was losing badly. "All human vessels," Jake broadcast, "begin infiltration approach." One by one, the human ships broke away from the main battle. To the Coalition forces, it looked like Combat Wing 47 was retreating in panic. To the Devourer fleet, it looked like damaged Coalition ships were drifting away from the battle. Navigator Jackson's approach routes worked perfectly. The human ships moved through space like debris from destroyed Coalition vessels, following ballistic trajectories that looked completely natural. "Captain," Tony Rivera reported, "Devourer scanning systems are reading us as non-threatening. Our energy signatures look like failing life support systems and damaged engines." Jake watched the tactical display as they drifted closer to the massive Devourer command ships. They were less than 10,000 kilometers away now, close enough for Tony's virus upload to work. "All ships," he broadcast, "prepare for simultaneous upload on my mark." The 12 human vessels continued their seemingly helpless drift toward the enemy fleet. They looked like the wreckage of 6 months after the Battle of Meridian Defense Platform. Jake Morrison stood in the Coalition Council chambers facing representatives from dozens of alien species. The massive room buzzed with translation devices and the sound of dozens of different languages being spoken at once. Admiral Blake sat beside him at the human delegation table. They were the only two humans in a room full of beings who still couldn't quite believe what had happened. The Cronus representative, War Leader Thane, rose to speak. His 4 eyes focused on Jake with something that might have been respect. "Let's see. Coalition owes humanity a debt that cannot be repaid," he rumbled. "Your actions at Meridian saved not just our forces, but potentially every inhabited world in this sector." Murmurs of agreement came from around the room. The Vorthan delegate clicked her approval in their musical language. Even species that had never spoken to humans before were nodding their various forms of heads, but Jake felt no satisfaction. 8 human ships had been lost in the battle. Good people had died because he had made the choice to attack rather than retreat. The Coalition's top military analyst, a spindly creature called Keeper Vex, activated a holographic display showing battle statistics. The human infiltration of the Devourer command network was the first successful penetration of enemy systems in over 300 years of warfare, Vex announced. More significantly, the virus they uploaded has provided us with detailed information about Devourer capabilities and weaknesses. Admiral Blake leaned forward. "What kind of information?" "Complete tactical databases, ship specifications, and most importantly, the location of their primary construction facilities." The room fell silent. For the first time in the history of the war, the Coalition knew where the Devourers were building their fleets. "There's more," Keeper Vex continued. "Analysis of the human virus program has revealed why it was so effective. Human-computer programming follows logical patterns that are completely unknown to galactic AI development. The Devourer systems had no defense against programming languages they had never encountered. Jake looked around the room at alien faces that were trying to process this information. For centuries, they had assumed that military technology was fixed and unchangeable. The idea that humans could simply create new approaches was difficult for them to understand. "Keeper Vex," Admiral Blake said, "what are the Coalition's plans for future operations?" "That is why we have called this meeting," Thane replied. "The Coalition War Council has voted to offer humanity a permanent position as strategic advisors." Jake felt surprised. "Strategic advisors?" "More than that," said the Vorthan delegate, her voice singing even through the translation device. "We want human officers to train Coalition forces in adaptive tactics. We want human engineers to work with our technology specialists to develop new weapon systems. We want to learn how to think like humans." The irony wasn't lost on Jake. A few months ago, the Coalition had considered humans to be primitive cannon, fodder. Now they wanted to learn human military methods. "There's something else," Keeper Vex added. "We've received communications from several neutral species that have been monitoring the war. Word of human tactical innovations has spread throughout this region of the galaxy. A new holographic display showed star maps with dozens of previously unknown civilizations. 17 different species have requested human assistance in defending against Devourer attacks. 3 others want to join the Coalition specifically to work with human forces." Admiral Blake exchanged glances with Jake. "That's a lot of responsibility." "Yes," Thane agreed, "but it's also an opportunity. For the first time in centuries, we have a real chance to end this war." After the formal meeting ended, Jake and Admiral Blake met privately with Keeper Vex and a small group of Coalition military leaders. "We need to be honest with you," Admiral Blake said. "What humans did at Meridian wasn't just tactics, it was desperation. We knew we were probably going to die, so we took risks that no sane military force would consider." "But that's exactly what made it work," Keeper Vex replied. "Coalition forces have been so focused on minimizing casualties and preserving honor that we stopped taking the kind of risks necessary to win." Jake had been thinking about this for months. "The problem isn't that you lack courage. The problem is that you've been fighting the same war for so long that you've forgotten how to adapt." "What do you mean?" "Every species in the Coalition has ancient military traditions that worked well for thousands of years. But the Devourers have had time to study and counter all of those traditions. You need to be willing to abandon methods that no longer work." Thane looked uncomfortable. "You're asking us to abandon the wisdom of our ancestors." "No," Admiral Blake said gently. "We're asking you to honor your ancestors by being willing to learn new wisdom. The best way to respect their sacrifices is to make sure their deaths weren't meaningless." Over the following weeks, human officers spread throughout the Coalition fleet. Tony Rivera worked with alien engineers to develop weapons that could be modified in real time during battle. Navigator Paul Jackson taught Coalition pilots movement patterns based on Earth biology and physics. Dr. Lisa Grant established communication protocols that allowed for rapid tactical adaptation. Beth Williams trained alien communications officers. In the art of coordinated improvisation, the results were remarkable. Coalition forces began winning engagements they would have lost months earlier. More importantly, they were winning in new ways, using tactics that kept evolving faster than the Devourer AI could adapt. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Gary Phillips arrived from Earth with a team of human scientists and a proposal that changed everything. "We've been thinking about this war all wrong," he announced at a Coalition strategy meeting. "We've been treating it as a military problem, but it's really a technological problem." Phillips activated a display showing Devourer ship construction patterns. "Look at how they build their fleets. Everything is standardized. Every ship uses the same AI systems, the same weapons, the same defensive protocols. Jake began to understand. Standardization makes them predictable. Exactly. And predictability makes them vulnerable. But here's the interesting part. We think we can use their own standardization against them. Phillips showed detailed analysis of the virus that had crippled the Devourer fleet at Meridian. The virus didn't just disrupt their command systems, it also copied their entire tactical database and transmitted it back to us. What does that mean? Admiral Blake asked. It means we know how they're programmed to respond to every possible threat. We can predict their tactics better than they can predict ours. Colonel Susan Martinez had arrived with Phillips and the Earth team. She took over the briefing. We're proposing a coordinated campaign against all known Devourer construction facilities. But instead of using traditional assault tactics, we hit them with simultaneous viral attacks designed to corrupt their entire manufacturing network. The alien representatives looked confused. This was thinking on a scale they had never considered. You're talking about attacking their entire civilization at once, Keeper Vex said slowly. That's exactly what we're talking about, Colonel Martinez replied. The Devourers have been winning because they think systematically. They coordinate all their actions through centralized AI networks. But that coordination is also their weakness. Jake was beginning to see the scope of what the humans were proposing. If we can corrupt their central systems, we can stop them from building new ships, coordinating attacks, or even communicating between their fleets. Right. Instead of fighting a 1,000-year war of attrition, we ended in a few months. The coalition voted unanimously to support the human plan. Within weeks, joint human-alien teams were developing virus programs in dozens of different programming languages. They created attack vectors that no galactic AI had ever seen before. The campaign began 3 months later. Coordinated strikes hit Devourer facilities across 12 star systems simultaneously. Each attack was different, using locally adapted tactics and unique technological approaches. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Devourer construction stopped completely. Their fleets lost the ability to coordinate large-scale operations. Most importantly, they lost the adaptive learning that had made them so dangerous. Jake stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Horizon's Promise, watching the last major Devourer fleet surrender without firing a shot. Their AI systems had been so thoroughly corrupted that they could barely maintain life support, let alone fight. Captain, Beth Williams said from her station, we're receiving surrender communications from the Devourer command ship. Jake could hardly believe it. After 1,000 years of war, the enemy was giving up. Put them through. The main screen showed a creature that looked nothing like what Jake had expected. The Devourer commander was tall and thin, with large eyes that seemed filled with exhaustion. Human, vessel, the alien said in heavily accented galactic standard. We request terms for surrender of all Devourer forces in this sector. Jake looked at Admiral Blake, who nodded. We'll accept your surrender, Jake said. But we want to understand something. Why did you attack the Coalition in the first place? The Devourer comm. Commander Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the enemy fleet grow larger on his screen. The UHS Defiance floated alone in the dark space of the Kepler Nebula. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with calm faces. They knew what was coming. The alien ships looked like nothing Jake had ever seen before. Some were huge and made of crystal that caught the light from nearby stars. Others moved like insects, with long, thin parts that bent and twisted. The third type glowed with strange energy that hurt to look at directly. Jake counted the ships. On his screen, 1,000, maybe more. All of them pointed at his single human vessel. Lieutenant Amy Carter looked up from her weapons station. Her brown hair was pulled back tight, and her green eyes were steady. She had been with Jake for 3 years. She knew him well enough to read the small smile on his face. They really brought everyone, Amy said. They did, Jake replied. He turned to look at his other crew members. Chief Engineer Ben Murphy sat at the back of the bridge, his thick fingers moving over the controls for the ship's power systems. Ben was older than the rest of them, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. He had worked on ships for 20 years. Navigation Officer Lisa Brooks was young and quick. Her job was to keep track of where they were and where they needed to go. She watched the alien ships move into position around them. The enemy was trying to trap the Defiance so it could not run away. Communications specialist Danny Hayes listened to the alien radio signals. His equipment could translate most alien languages. What he heard made him shake his head. "Sir, they are laughing at us," Danny said. "They think this is some kind of joke." Jake walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the alien fleet. The ships were getting closer. He could see gun ports opening and weapons turning toward his ship. The aliens thought they were about to win an easy fight. The largest alien ship was made of blue crystal. It was 10 times bigger than the Defiance. A voice came from it, speaking in broken human language. "Small human ship," the voice said. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "You are alone. We are many. Your weapons are weak. Your armor is thin. Why do you not run?" Jake picked up his communication device. "This is Commander Sullivan of the United Human Ship Defiance. We are here because we choose to be here." The alien voice laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You choose to die. How strange. We thought humans were smarter than this." More alien voices joined the first one. They came from different ships and spoke different languages, but Danny's equipment translated them all. The insects clicked and buzzed about how easy it would be to crack open the human ship. The energy beings hummed about studying human technology after they killed the crew. Jake listened to it all with the same small smile. His crew watched him and stayed calm because he stayed calm. They had trained for this day. They knew things. The aliens did not know. Amy checked her weapons one more time. The Defiance carried standard plasma cannons and basic missiles. Nothing special. Nothing that could fight 1,000 enemy ships and win. At least that is what the weapons looked like from the outside. Ben's fingers moved over his controls. Deep in the ship, systems that the aliens could not detect were warming up. Power flowed through new circuits that human scientists had worked on for years. The Defiance looked like an ordinary human ship, but it was something much more. Lisa watched the alien ships move into their attack formation. They spread out in a wide circle around the human ship. Some moved above and some moved below. They wanted to hit the Defiance from all sides at once. Danny kept listening to the alien communications. The 3 different species were working together, which was new. Usually they fought each other, but they all hated humans more than they hated each other. "Sir," Danny said, "they are talking about Earth. They know we have been working on something called Project Mirror. That is why they came here." Jake nodded. The aliens had spies and informants throughout human space. They had heard rumors about a new human weapon. They decided to destroy it before humans could use it. But they did not understand what Project Mirror really was. The crystal ship sent another message. "We know about your secret weapon, humans. We will destroy it, and you, together. Your species has caused enough trouble in this galaxy." Jake looked at Amy. She raised her eyebrows as if to ask if he was ready. He looked at Ben, who gave him a small nod. Lisa and Danny both watched him and waited. A new voice came through the communication system. It was calm and professional, speaking with an Earth accent. "UHS Defiance, this is General Patricia Lewis, Human Defense Command. You have permission to proceed with Protocol 7. Jake felt something cold move through his chest. Protocol 7 was the final option. The Quao. Thing they had built the Defiance to do. The reason his crew had trained so hard for so long. "Understood, General," Jake said. "Protocol 7 is authorized." The alien ships were very close now. Jake could see the details on their hulls. The crystal ships had sharp edges that could cut through metal. The insect ships had weapons that shot acid strong enough to eat through anything. The energy ships could fire beams of pure heat. All of those weapons were pointed at his ship. "They are going to fire soon," Lisa said. "Their formation is complete." Jake walked back to his command chair and sat down. He looked around at his crew one more time. They were good people. They had families back on Earth. They had joined the human space navy to protect those families. Today, they would do exactly that. "Amy," Jake said, "prepare the mirror protocol." Amy's hands moved over her controls. Lights on her station turned, from red to yellow. "Mirror protocol ready, sir." The alien fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons fired at once. Plasma bolts, energy beams, acid projectiles, and crystal spears all flew toward the small human ship. The aliens expected to see it explode in a ball of fire. They expected the battle to be over in seconds. Instead, something impossible happened. The Defiance did not try to dodge. It did not fire back. It just sat in space as if nothing was wrong. The alien weapons hit the ship's shields and bounced away. But they did not bounce randomly. Each weapon that hit the Defiance appeared somewhere else in space, flying back toward the ship that had fired it. The crystal ship that had been talking to Jake suddenly found its own spears punching through its hull. The insect ships watched their acid eat through their own armor. The energy ships screamed as their own heat beams burned them. Jake smiled as his ship sat untouched in the middle of the chaos. "Welcome to the future," he said quietly.